Eileen explores NYC off the grid.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me. I'm Eileen Lehpamer, and this is Eileen Explores NYC Off the Grid, our third episode. And today, we're taking a look at something that you may have heard about. It used to be known as Potter's Field, but it is much more than that, much more than a graveyard. We are talking about Hart Island. And if you don't know where that is, we'll get into all of that and all of the uses of Hart Island over the years since at least 1869. We have history dating back that far. Now, we are joined today by the Urban Rangers, Sergeant Daniel Tainow and Whalen. Thank you so much for joining us. So tell me about Hart Island. I was speaking with a friend earlier, and she said to me, where is Hart Island? It is in the Bronx, technically.
Yes.
Right?
So Hart Island is an island off of City Island in the Bronx, also close to Orchard Beach. It is about a mile long and 3/4 of a mile wide, so about 120 acres, and it sits in the Long Island Sound.
And the New York City Parks Department does offer tours there. How long have you been doing these tours?
We've been leading tours to Hart Island. The Urban Park Rangers lead tours since November 2023, so about over 2 years.
Okay. And I want to know, why do people want to tour this? Do you feel in any way that it's still secret or people don't really know what to expect when they get there?
We still do have a lot of interest in people coming on the tour. They want to know the history. They want to get closer to people both from history, but also sometimes family members, as well as go to a place that's interesting.
Right, and know the history. So let's get into it a little bit. Tell me, when I was looking at an aerial shot of it from a while ago, there's a big red building, or there was a big red building that looked abandoned. Was that the hospital site? What is that?
Yeah, so that Hart Island Hospital, it was also reused for many different purposes throughout time. So unfortunately, we no longer have a lot of those physical structures there on the island. That was mainly to prioritize making it better for visitors, both for people going on our tours, but also for people visiting their loved ones. But structures like that, yeah, in terms of medical institutions that were there was in 1870, just a couple of years after the city bought it, there was already a yellow fever hospital. There was tuberculosis wards. There was a typhoid center as well, especially because there were outbreaks every year among the inmates that were living and working on the island. So
everyday New Yorkers would be sent to Hart Island to quarantine?
So yeah, everyday New Yorkers, as well as people that were already living and working on the island. So throughout various points of the island's history, there were up to several thousand people living there year round. And all the way up till now, where no one lives there year round. So I think a lot of times people think about it as this kind of desolate place with not much happening on it, but it really has been a dynamic place across its, at least with the city ownership, 150 years.
Right. And some other maybe little known history is that, was it ever a military base? Were missiles kept there?
Yeah. So yeah, there's been multiple military installations on Hart Island throughout the years. But yeah, there's still the remnants of the Nike missile base that's there. So the missiles are no longer there, I will say. But yeah, so they were commissioned in 1954. Decommissioned 1962, but you can go up to the bases and you can see the cement slabs where underneath the missiles were held. There is currently a fence around it, so you can't go and take a look in. But yeah, it's pretty incredible.
So they were stored there, never launched from there or anything.
Correct. So those missiles were never deployed. And then the control center was on a nearby island, David's Island, and it was a fort called Fort Slocum that would have launched them, but they were never deployed.
Okay.
Yeah. And this was a result of New York's response to the Cold War, kind of this ramping up at a time of international crisis and fear about post World War II. So yeah.
And keeping with the war, during the Civil War, I see you have a photo here. Was it used as a training ground? Yeah,
so that actually, even before the city purchased the island in 1968, so it was used as a military training ground for Black volunteer troops. Specifically, they were called the U.S. 31st Colored Troop. So there, in this photo here, I have two gentlemen that were part of the 31st. So this gentleman here holding the fife is Tobias Trout.
Mhm.
He was a member of the 31st, as well as Henry Smith here. So everyone else pictured is part of other Black regiments in the Civil War. This was taken outside of a hospital in Virginia.
Okay.
But these are some of the few images we have of these troops, who again were volunteers at this point in time. These folks were considered not even fully human, but they still decided to join and fight for a country that didn't really believe in them, in order to fight for, I think what they were thinking of is their own freedom and the freedom of other Black people.
And so was there a reason why their training was on Hart Island?
Yeah, racism. So they were segregated from the other white troops that were training in New York.
And where were they training? Not.
I don't really know,
No.
but the white troops were not training on Hart Island.
And overall, we talk about what was called Potter's Field.
Yeah.
And that would be where unidentified or poor New Yorkers would go.
Yeah, so it's a lot of that. One of the reasons why we've stopped using the word Potter's Field is because most of the people that are buried on Hart Island today are known. They are identified. Their families know where they are. Their families come and visit them. Certainly earlier on, there was more instances where people could not identify individuals being laid to rest there, or specifically thinking back to like the mid 1800s, the way you could find out where your family member was, what had happened to them. Like say you died in New York City, but most of your family was in another country. Also thinking of communication methods, how much they've advanced since then. We have a lot more ways to get in touch with family members and to make sure that loved ones are able to find out where their folks are buried.
And about how many people are buried now or have been buried?
Yeah. In
like about
total,
a million?
approximately 1 million New Yorkers have been laid to rest there. And in terms of annually, those numbers change, but about 1,000 New Yorkers are buried there every year.
Okay. I want to take a quick break and we'll get back to a little bit more about that use of Hart Island and some other things that I definitely did not know when I started to look into the history of Hart Island. We'll be right back.
You're watching Eileen Explores NYC Off the Grid.
And thank you for joining us again. I'm Eileen Lehpamer, and this is Eileen Explores Off the Grid. We are talking about Hart Island today, and we were looking at the history of it as a burial ground. That's what we were talking about just before we went to break. So I wanted to ask a little bit more about that. And in particular, I read that it was the largest burial place for people who died of AIDS.
Yes. So, it's estimated that it's the largest burial ground for people who died of AIDS-related complications in North America. And so during the height of the AIDS crisis, a pandemic that's not over, during that height, funeral directors associations across New York City refused to take the bodies of people who had passed from AIDS complications. As a result, for that reason, and also many of the people who were affected, queer and trans people, their loved ones didn't want to claim them. So for a couple of different reasons, it led to many of those individuals being buried on Hart Island. Yeah.
And looking at some of the other history of it, was there a plan to make it an amusement park?
So yes. So, and again, this is all while it's still an active cemetery.
Yes.
In 1925, Solomon Riley, also called Millionaire Riley, he tried to build an amusement park there. So he was originally, him and his family were from Barbados. They moved to New York City, and he was really important in the Harlem Renaissance in terms of making it a space for the Black community. He also wanted a place where Black people could play, where they could go with their families and have leisure time. So at this point, Rye Playland, Coney Island, they were still segregated.
Okay.
So Black people couldn't go there. So he had built the entire amusement park. He set everything up. He had his own fleet of ferries. It was going to be incredible. There was a dance hall, a boardwalk.
And what happened?
The city pulled the plug at the last minute. And the official reason given was that there was concerns over some of the inmates who were on the island, the incarcerated people, being able to escape via the ferry system. Like they would blend in with the crowd and escape that way. But I think largely that it was just plainly due to racism, because, that was why did they bring that up after everything had been constructed? That doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he fought the city and fought the city to get some money back. He got some of that money back, but ultimately that dream was never realized. But he always maintained that it was Black people's right to have a place of leisure and enjoyment, just like white people. So he was a pretty incredible person.
Wow. And keeping with the entertainment vein of the island, because it has had so many uses.
Yeah.
That bands played there, including the Velvet Underground, which I cannot believe. Tell me about how that happened.
So there was a drug rehabilitative facility called Phoenix House. And they would host these concerts called The Happenings. They were completely sober concerts. And it was spread through word of mouth. And people came on the ferry over and went to these massive concerts with huge headlining bands, like the Velvet Underground. And there were like 80,000 people that would attend. It was huge. I have a photo here from one of the 1970 happenings. You can see the performer over here, and also just like looking at this crowd.
Is that the Velvet Underground, or we don't know?
No, it's not. But there was this huge bubble that they would construct in the middle of the island, and all the concert goers would go under there. So it was pretty incredible. Yeah.
Wow. So we've talked about so much history, and how much of this can you see if you go and take the tour? Tell me about how New Yorkers get there, and what of all of this history can they still see?
So we take the public there 2 times a month. You can sign up on, look up Hart Island on the New York City or the Parks Department website. And you sign up for a lottery about 2 weeks before your scheduled tour. We've had up to 1,000 people in a lottery, and only can choose 30 at a time. And the Rangers explain all of the great history plus more that Fee just talked about.
So walking around, obviously you can still see headstones, right, from people who are identified. So are there names on the headstones, or like is there an area where you would see these graves?
So all of the graves on Hart Island, excepting a few of the AIDS burials, are all mass plots. So there's no names on those head markers. There's a number, but it's highly systematized. So the Hart Island office and the Human Resources Administration, they're the ones that keep the records of who's buried where. So they can show you where your loved one's buried. There's a plot number, and they've laid out exactly where each individual is, but there's not individual names.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so you have 1,000 people on this wait list. So it's a pretty popular tour, right? So do people just keep reapplying and hoping to get to go?
Yes, lots of people have, and some people have made it through a couple of times, and we've actually started to introduce specialty programs like Pride or Black History Month to dig deeper into some of the history on Hart Island. And in the winter, you have a better chance of getting in. It's less than 100 sometimes in our lottery for 30 spots.
So even in the cold weather, you're still going?
Yes, we go twice a month, every month.
Okay. And that's the only way to go to Hart Island? Or you could take a private boat there?
No, you cannot take a private boat there. You can book a private tour with us through our Natural Classroom program. And that is for mostly, so far, only colleges have done that with us, and a few nonprofit groups. But it is open to the public to book these private tours as well as you can visit, if you have a loved one there, through our Hart Island office. Does weekend twice a month as well for family members and loved ones.
Thank you so much. So I'll have all that information on our website as well if you want to learn more about it. Thank you for joining us. Very informative. I feel like we rushed through it because there's so much to talk about Hart Island. Thank you. I'm Eileen Lehpamer, and this is Eileen Explores NYC Off the Grid.